In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Nilfisk Buddy 2 Wet and Dry Vac, and this is the 12 litre version of it. It does also come in 22 and 30 litre versions, but this one is ideal for car cleaning. Nilfisk did kindly send this for me to test out, so I am going to give you my honest opinion, show it in action, and give you the pros and cons of it as well. So hopefully at the end of the video you can decide if it's a piece of equipment that's suitable for you. So as I said, this is the 12 litre version and it is fairly compact, measuring 36 by 33 by 44 centimetres. In terms of the accessories that it actually comes with, there are two different options when you purchase this. You can either purchase the standard accessory pack, in which case you'll get the crevice nozzle, the floor attachment and two plastic poles to connect that up to. If however you purchase the car pack, that's going to come with a lot more useful accessories. So you also get the upholstery nozzle, a longer crevice nozzle to help fit in tighter gaps, for example between the seats, a soft brush attachment which can be really useful for dusting vents. The bristles are pretty flexible, but I still wouldn't use it on areas like gloss black plastics. It's great though on leather seats and more intricate textured plastic areas. It also comes with a turbo nozzle, which is probably my favourite out of the accessories, as it's not something I've used before and I find it really useful for vacuuming mats. The only thing that it doesn't come with that I wish it would is a wet vacuum extraction head. So you obviously can use the other attachments, but I like to see what's actually being pulled up by the vacuum during the Wet-Vac stage. So I did pick one up on Amazon. Now the vacuum hose diameter of this Nilfisk Buddy is 36mm, so I found that it fits 35mm accessories. So I did actually struggle to find a 35mm extraction head, but I could quite easily find a 32mm one and then a 32 to 35mm adapter, which I just got from Amazon and I will link in the description as well. Finally, it does come with that paper dust bag, so this can be easily installed by just lining up the grooves on the underneath of that head unit, slotting it in place and then just turning it to lock it in. It didn't really require any other extra setup apart from pushing the hose in place, and there's just a single on switch on top. There is no adjustability for the suction power, but this is pretty standard. Now I wanted to talk a little bit more about the performance and how I've actually been using it over the past few months in terms of car detailing. So this piece of equipment does have three different functions. So firstly, it does just have that standard dry vacuum function, which I found more than capable for cleaning car interiors. Now I have dealt with some more difficult interiors using this, and I found that using a drill brush to help agitate some debris out of the fabric can be useful, particularly if you're dealing with problematic things like sand, but this is something I've always really had to do. And I think this is more than capable as a standard vacuum, and I've been really happy with it. Now the second function of this is as a wet vacuum. So this is of course really useful for extracting fabric seats and mats. There are certain interiors where I absolutely have to do this stage, as otherwise the finish just really wouldn't come up how I wanted it to. Even if I made use of things like a steam cleaner and stronger chemicals, I do feel like extraction is really necessary in a lot of situations. To switch it over to that wet vac function, don't really have to do much. All I did was remove the paper bag and I kept that filter in place and then just switched over to that wet vac nozzle that I purchased on Amazon. Again, the suction power here is really good. I didn't find myself having to really repeat the extraction stage much, and it was able to pull out a lot of dirt from the fabric really quite quickly. So I felt like this did help speed up the process for me, and also has the added benefits of being able to dry the fabrics out quicker, which at this time of year is obviously a massive benefit. Now the final function is the blower function. So to switch over to this, you just pull out the hose and plug it in at the back. Now the blower function of this is actually very powerful and definitely compares to my Blow-Air RS car dryer, which is of course designed specifically for that purpose. If you do want to use this to dry your car, then I would probably recommend getting an extra hose and crevice attachment just dedicated for this function. So this is going to stop you blowing any debris back onto the car. Of course you can give it a quick blast away from the paintwork when you first switch it on, but just to be really safe, I do think that that would be an appropriate measure to take. This unit does have a filter built into it, so I'm not worried about the air quality otherwise, just the contamination of the tools that I've been using previously for vacuuming. You can also use this blower function to blast debris from certain areas when doing the interior of the car as well. Now in the next part of the video, I did just want to talk through the pros and cons of this machine, and I am going to be drawing some comparisons as well to my Henry HVR 160 vacuum that I've been using for the past couple of years. So I will start off with the negatives, and the first one that I noticed when I was using this is that the 4-metre mains cable does feel quite limiting. I do always have to use an extension cable when I'm using this machine, as otherwise it is just quite difficult to use. So I do wish that it did have a longer mains cable on there, like my Henry, which does have a pretty impressive 10-metre one. The second disadvantage that I noticed is it is actually really quite loud. I will jump into a little sound test on here comparing it, but it definitely was fairly noticeable when I was using it. and just something to keep in mind if you are a little bit conscious about that, where you might be vacuuming. In terms of the performance, I do feel like this was very comparable to the Henry. I can't give you any exact numbers here as I did really struggle to find them, but just anecdotally, they do feel like they're offering a very similar performance in a practical sense. The disadvantage here though with the Nilfisk is it does have a 1200 watt motor. The Henry that I've been using does only have a 620 watt motor, so you are of course going to be using more electricity when using the Nilfisk. Again, in a practical sense, this isn't costing too much more, but just something to keep in mind, for example, if you're running off a generator, and if you are a little bit more conscious about the power that you're using. The accessories on the whole of the Nilfisk I do think are really good. The turbo nozzle in particular I think is very impressive. There are a couple of things that I noticed though, and firstly is that the Nilfisk does have plastic tubes and a plastic floor attachment, whereas the Henry does use stainless steel tubes, and the floor attachment does definitely feel more robust. This is though reflected in the price of these machines, and I don't really use the floor attachments much, so I'm not really bothered here. The actual accessories that I'm using on the car, I do feel like the Nilfisk has a slight edge. A disadvantage though that I did notice about the hose on the Nilfisk is that it does have a plastic curved part on the end, which definitely helps to get a better angle in some situations. However, when vacuuming the footwells I did feel like it was a little bit awkward, and I do feel like it would be easier if that plastic part was straight instead. Now onto the advantages of this machine, and I do think there are quite a few to mention here. Firstly, it does have onboard storage for those attachments, so there are 4 little slots that you can pop those in, and then also a little hook as well, where you can either slot on the floor attachment and poles, or use it to wrap around your mains cable. It doesn't have any storage for the actual vacuum hose, which is pretty standard, but it doesn't have any kind of retractable storage for the mains cable, which would be handy, but again, not really essential. Second advantage that I've noticed after using it for the past couple of months is that the car pack accessories are really useful. Having that extra long crevice attachment for reaching between seats is handy. The soft brush attachment again is great for vents, and I would struggle to go back to not using this turbo nozzle on the carpets, as again it really just helps to speed things up. And another advantage that I did just really want to highlight is that I think the value for money on this piece of equipment is very, very good. With the car pack, this retails for £99.99, which is cheaper than my Henry HVR 160, which retails for around 160, but you usually can find it from sort of anywhere between 120 to 130, depending on what time of year you're looking. The value for money really comes into play though, when you consider the fact that the Nilfisk has both a wet and dry vac function, and also the blow function as well. The Henry is just a straight up dry vacuum, and you can't use it for any extraction, so you do need extra pieces of equipment there, and that's obviously going to bring the price of your overall kit up quite a bit. So if you are an enthusiast that's storing all your equipment in your garage or your shed, or a mobile detailer that's storing it in a van, then you don't need additional separate pieces of equipment here. I've personally done quite a few cars now, and I've just used this and the steam cleaner and not felt like I needed anything else. And also the price saving that you're making here you can put towards using a steamer if you are a professional looking to set up the kit, or an enthusiast that just wants those 2 pieces of equipment to keep the car in perfect condition all the way around. Just keep in mind though that this Nilfisk does just have a domestic warranty, so if you are a professional then that is something you're probably going to want to consider. So I will be putting a link to this Wet and Dry Vac in the description so you can easily find it, and if you have found this video helpful then it would be brilliant if you could drop it a like, and thanks very much for watching.